Thank you for joining me today. I have Tifanie Mayberry on the LifePro podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's such an honor. It's nice to see you here, Omid.
Likewise. Today our topic is going to be a suppression of feelings and how they affect our lives. Why don't you start out by telling everybody about your journey, your life's journey?
Yeah. You and I met back in the day in Venice Beach, California. And a big part of my story is growing up fourth generation Hollywood, meaning that I grew up as the fourth generation to live and partake in the industry in some capacity. My great grandma did movies until her 90s. My grandpa introduced Sammy Davis Jr. to the Rat Pack. My brother was on a well known reality TV show. My uncle was a sub drummer for the Birds and worked with Frank Zappa. And then I got to work in the hair industry and worked as a celebrity hairdresser for some time. So I had a really interesting journey. And then because of coming from that background, I actually saw the impacts of how it affected my family. And I lost my mom by the time I was 23 to her addiction to pharmaceutical opiates. It was pretty under the radar, but it was ultimately what led to her heart failure. So I learned very early quite a few lessons. But after she passed away, I decided I was going to move away and become a doctor of natural medicine. Had no idea what that meant. It's just a awakening I had, per se. And ultimately, what I recognized was that there was something that was going on in the culture that I grew up in that was really leading to the propensity to have alcoholism or addiction. And I knew that I needed to get out of the environment to understand what I needed to heal about it because it took out my whole family. And so for the last 15 years, I've spent somewhere near like 10,000 hours studying healing medicine, guiding, and spirituality to figure out what the root of healing looks like. And I feel that after the time and energy I've spent in that realm, I've gotten a pretty good, clear idea on what that looks like for people. So that's a little bit about my journey.
Great. So what are you doing specifically these days to, as far as a job? What's your passion? What are you working on? What keeps you
Yeah.
busy these days?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So right now I am about 5 months, 6 months from graduating with my master's in acupuncture. And once I take my boards, I'll be an LAC, which is a licensed acupuncturist. I have 4 years of naturopathic medicine under my belt as well. And I decided after 4 years that I do not want to pursue being a doctor, which is interesting. And instead, what I've focused on and what my main job is right now is coaching. And so I've been a life coach and I've been doing that for the last year successfully. And I would say, of all the things that I do, I love healing, but coaching has become a really big passion of mine.
Fantastic. So you mentioned your mom, and that's something that you and I have in common. About 3 years ago, I lost my mom unexpectedly. We always grew up with, she always had heart issues, and we always grew up like dealing with that, and that was always a fear. She went into elective heart surgery to replace a valve, and just never came out of the hospital. And as you described, that was pretty traumatic for myself and for my family, and really, changed the trajectory of our lives. And it was the first time I really had to deal with such deep emotions and had to deal with such a grave experience, and nothing that I could ever put into words. It was just a moment that really was so difficult on me. I the first month after she passed away, I was just in bed. I couldn't do anything. Um, I was grateful I had a good supporting system. I had a lot of friends and family. And at first, communicating about my feelings was pretty easy. I was crying all the time, but you get to a certain point where, you don't want to burden people with your feelings, and you just kind of want to cope with them. Obviously, I went through therapy and did a lot of things to kind of make sure that I'm communicating, but at some point you start suppressing feelings. So I know that that's something that we're talking about today is suppression on feelings, whether it's a lost loved one or a relationship, which I know that you've had a experience with. So if you can talk to us a little bit more about what do you recommend for people that have gone through similar situations of, pretty life-changing moments, whether it's changing, losing a loved one, changing jobs, dealing with a breakup, which I know that recently you've kind of dealt with and are helping other people towards. So I'd love to hear more about your advice for people out there.
Yeah. So, one, just how shocking it is to not know the outcome of like this surgery and to just be slapped in the face with it. I just want to acknowledge you for one, speaking to that, especially as a masculine appearing person. Um, to express and talk about that already shows that you've done a lot of work. And I think that is a testament to understanding the depth of how much this can affect us. Uh, it sounds like it really hit you pretty heavily. And some of those responses that we have to loss are very deeply rooted in our history growing up. So when I lost my mom, I was 23 and I was medicating, self-medicating in the worst, not the worst way, but in a very unhealthy way, which for me was going out and drinking. My brother was on a TV show. I got to hang out with celebrities. I got to go to the Hollywood Hills parties and rub elbows with A-list celebrities. So I thought my life was like, that was it. Like that was the peak experience that you can go for in Hollywood at that age. And so for the first little bit, um, there was a spiritual acceptance. The timing of her death was on 11/2/2011, and I have an affinity for numbers, specifically 11 and 22. So when I recognized that, I was like, okay, it was time. And unlike your experience, my entire life, she was slowly dying. And it
Yeah.
was a matter of when, and nothing anyone could do or say was going to change her trajectory, even though internally and subconsciously, even to this day, you could say that it still heavily affects me in the way that it has really directed the path that I've chosen in the way that I try to help people heal, essentially, at the end of the day. And specifically, I work with women more intentionally to address that wounded feminine, as I call it. And so I was in a rough place for probably about 6 months as well. I took 3 months off of my undergrad and then got right back into school. Didn't really give myself a break except for the integrated summers for about 10 years. So I actually just put myself into working and becoming really intelligent and developing my value, because if I was good enough, things would be different in my future, is the story that I had in my head. But 6 months after she passed, I was at Coachella, of all places, and I had an awakening that was ignited from what I was seeing amongst the crowd. And there was some interesting things going on that some people would call a little woo-woo, but it did seem like there was some subliminal hypnotic messaging happening. And something that I had just studied in communications and anthropology, psychology, and I just saw some weird things that I was like, ooh, this is not good. And it was encouraging this really low vibrational way of living. And I just knew if I stay here, I'm going to get sucked into this and I need to leave. And so I got this message that I needed to go pursue natural medicine, become a doctor of natural medicine, and really kind of take back all the layers of all of the aspects of myself that developed in this environment that I'd grown up in. And so I moved into a hippie commune, lived there for 3 years, lived off of the earth. I had chickens and cows and dancing horses and like a whole community of people, and really just allowed myself to unravel per se while finishing up my bachelor's at UC Santa Cruz. Um, but what I recognized was healing is a very non-linear experience. And I thought healing was going to be in food. I thought it was going to be in yoga, in the right supplements. in spirituality. I tried every which way and then eventually got into Chinese medicine, into naturopathic medicine. And what I recognized after working with hundreds of patients was that the healing had something to do with more than the medicine itself, more than the doctor. And what I felt was missing in my experience was that the patients often expected the healing to come from outside themselves.
Right.
And really, when you're experiencing all of those emotions, especially, the work is on the inside. And so learning what that even means, and even the fact that I got to that point is kind of an interesting story. We were talking at one of our Chinese medicine retreats with my colleagues about, woo-woo things and out-of-body experiences. And we went into the depth of what that looks like. I come home a few days later, I'm in this in-between state that we were just talking about. And I was like, oh my God, I'm here. I'm in the in-between state where I can do the out-of-body thing. And so I woke up. I was raised Christian. So I woke up and I was like, God, like out loud. So I woke up and was like, God, almost like a child would be like, Mom, Dad. And was like, God, like, come with me. I'm going to go in. And so,
Wow.
yeah, it was a real interesting
What a
thing. So weird. And then I like went back to sleep. I thought I was trying to. And then I was like, dang it, it's not happening. And just as I was thinking that, I came out of my body.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing the thing. And I float to the top of my bed and my arms reached out almost like, like I'm a cross, which is maybe a little sacrilegious, but forgive me. I'm like at the top of my bed. And I'm just like, this is weird. And then this really big voice, not that I would feel it was God. If you ask me, I think it was Archangel Michael. I know this is woo woo for some folks. This is the first time I'd had this experience. So it's not like a common thing for me. And it was like, Tifanie, listen, please, please, please. Healing comes from within. And then my body started doing this really interesting, like Kundalini activation. And again, didn't know what was happening. And then I was like, okay, I'm good. That's enough for me. I went back to my body, woke up instantly, told my friends, like, I did it. I did the thing we just talked about. And here's the message I learned. And I actually didn't even know what that meant. And I kept trying to figure out what it meant for years. And I don't think it was until I had to. Life just happened. It was a divine intervention, if you ask me. But so many things lined up to where I had to take a year leave of absence from med school. I'd been in school for that full 10 years. And I took a year leave. I moved to Costa Rica. And the first 3 to 6 months, I was just angry.
Right.
And I didn't even understand where it was coming from. And then I actually got to another low. And I've experienced a lot of depression, anxiety, PTSD, ADHD, all the diagnoses. I actually don't really believe in diagnoses, but it paints a picture of what we can understand is going on with the person.
Right.
And I hit a new low after like a 10-day fling with someone that was my twin flame, using all the buzzwords here. And I just like hit this dark moment where I was like, damn it, Tifanie, we're here again. We're done. Like, we need to figure out what this is. And it has to be shadow work. And it was one of those things where I just knew what it was, but I didn't understand why or how I knew that was what I needed to do. I just knew I needed to do it. And as I would learn from that point on, going into the parts of ourselves, the emotions, the experiences, the wishes and desires that went unmet, going into it is the medicine. And we have been convinced that the medicine is in trying to placate people and pacify their experiences and make it to where they don't have to experience it. And that's the exact opposite of what I believe in. So I now like to work with people of, okay, that thing that you just pulled yourself away from, for instance, a client last night, trying to get her into breathing and into her body. It was hard for her to keep her eyes closed because going into the body, into the darkness, into the feeling, into the feminine was something she resisted because her safe place was being out here in the activated masculine, very forward, very expressive, very whatever it means to not go into the feeling and to more so move into distractions. And so I think a lot of us, rather than express and experience the experiences and the feelings, we suppress them. And that's something that we do differently, depending on what your upbringing looked like.
Yeah. No, I mean, I had the same experience after my mom's passing. Once I was able to start accepting the situation, I suppressed my feelings by just keeping myself busy. I took on projects. I was doing everything I could to distract myself from having to feel those feelings. And it got to a point where the weight of the world just kind of comes onto you at some point and you break. And that's when you have your moment where you realize, okay, I need to deal with it. So speaking further on how to heal within, is it about communication? Is it about expression? Specifically, how do you get people to heal within?
Yeah, it is a journey, and I do believe in holistic approaches. So I think having an integrative team is really supportive. I'm biased, and I am going to say that having a coach is really supportive. Therapy is wonderful if you want to understand who you've been and how
Right.
you came to being this person.
Yeah.
And coaching is really good for your like, okay, I recognize that I have these challenges and I want to move past them towards something.
Right.
So, depending on where you're at in that process, judging for yourself what is helpful. I think that we can do a lot of work on our own through self-help books, podcasts, shows, etc. And there is a point where I think that you can exhaust that channel
Yeah.
and exhaust the supplements and the nutrition and all of the outside things that you can do. And at some point, it's nice to have someone who can facilitate
Yeah.
the space for you to be guided into your own experience and catch you in the blind spots we have. For instance, with that client yesterday, where she had a hard time going into her body, I'm like, hey, I'm just going to bring some awareness to you're having a hard time going into the body. Oh, yeah, that's been a thing, but like it gets to be held accountable. So, having a space where you can be held accountable to go into those spaces is really helpful. And I think that builds the foundation for you to be able to communicate. For instance, right before we talked today, I'm starting to date someone new and we're very fresh, not even official anything, but we're contemplating what it could look like months out from now. And we had our first little mini argument. And it was a moment where historically, and it wasn't even an argument, it was just like a challenging,
Difference.
yeah, a challenging conversation where we're both in the same world of coaching. And he started a group and didn't invite me, but because he was trying to be professional about it and didn't want to
Yeah.
have, you know, conflated like energetic to
Yeah.
the space. And we were still really new. He started this a month ago when we were just starting to talk. But I'm a triple Leo. I get really offended when people don't include me, when I don't get to be like a part of,
Yeah.
the tribe. And so traditionally I would have been like, oh, okay, shut down, remove myself, be a little avoidant, figure out my feelings, and then come back when I had an idea of what was going on, which is
Right.
still an okay approach. But through the work that I've done, I was able to speak to it in a way where this communication and expression part does come to play of, hey, I'm noticing this doesn't feel really good for me. Okay. And then we were able to discuss like, why doesn't it feel good? Where is that coming from? I have this history that tells me that I'm too much, but not enough. And when this happens, this is what I feel. And I like using the NVC model. When this happened, I felt this because I feared this.
Right.
And what I'm really needing is this. Here's my request. And so this is a really lovely tool for the listeners to use anytime that there's something that happens in a dynamic between people, to try and converse and express about what is a challenge for them in the dynamic. And it also gives you like a really approachable formula that allows the other person to understand where you're coming from instead of you did this and you made me this. It's
Right.
like, hey, can we explore that? And because we're both people that have done a lot of this work, it actually ended up being a really healing conversation, which was like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
supported, I'm safe, I'm secure. And these are not the same stories I got growing up. So
Right.
I'm building new patterns and
Right.
behaviors and stories about who I am in relationship, and who other people are.
Right.
So I do believe that coaching or therapy is really helpful. I will say I did about 30 years of therapy, and I've done more healing and more growth in the last year from
Right.
coaching than I've done from um, any of that.
What advice do you give people on obviously picking the right coach or the right therapist? Like, because you might be a great fit for somebody and not so great for another. How does somebody build that relationship and find make the right decision when it comes to therapy or coaching?
Right. I say it's good to date your therapist or coach in a way of getting to know them if that's possible. Seeing, I know some of my clients have like dated their therapist in a way of like, I'm going to try 3 sessions, see if it feels like a good match.
Yeah.
But the thing is right now, honestly, the mental health industry is booming.
Right.
And I am taking a course right now by Yale called The Science of Wellbeing. And antidepressants have gone up, the prescription of them has gone up 400 times in the last
Wow.
20 years.
Yeah.
That's insane. Um, so there's a big growth of people who are struggling with their emotions for sure. So I think it's important if you can get in getting to know them, dating your therapist. Social media really is a powerful tool. I know it's very new age and modern. You're going to miss some of the older, wiser therapists that have been around for decades, and there's some really great ones out there. But I do believe if you can find a coach or a therapist on social media and get to kind of date them from afar by the way you get to observe what their ideas about things are
Right.
and what their values are, what their practices are. I do think there's some foundational questions if you can just have 10, 15 minutes with a coach or a therapist you're considering of why do you do what you're doing? What is your spiritual discipline or what is your background and belief about this? What are your approaches? Who's your ideal client? And getting clear on what their niche or niche, I never know how to say that, for that person is, and feeling if there is a value alignment. I know with a client last night, that was one of the things that she really expressed enjoying about our sessions is that we just share so many similar values that there's a strong connection there. And rather than regurgitating all of the experiences she's gone through, there's like purpose and meaning. And it's like 10% of what we do. It's like, yes, there's the story. How do we transform that and transmute it into this power and this beauty and this gift that is you? Yeah,
A-
I'd say.
and how long do you think on average it takes to break through to your clients? Like, how many sessions does it take? I would imagine it's different, but just to give people an idea of like, it's an investment and it's investment of your time to
Yeah.
be able to grow and it's a process. So maybe if you can give an idea to people out there, like what's this process? How is this a lifelong thing, or they'll start seeing a return on their investments
Yeah.
soon?
Yeah. I would say, and I have high standards, I would say if you have a good coach on your disco call or discovery call, you will notice something big within the first call.
Right.
If you're not feeling a big shift or a big aha or like a strong yes internally, it's a no.
Right.
And a lot of my
That makes
colleagues, we like to say, if it's not a fuck yes, it's a no.
right. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
like and for like bigger transformational things. I would say you're going to notice a great shift in 3 months, but I've seen like full transformations in 6 months. And that's also the difference between coaching and therapy, is that there's like a goal in sight,
Right.
and you bring actual things to the table that you're like, I want to conquer this, this, and the other thing.
Right.
And that's what the coach's job is to do, is to like, all right, let's get past these hurdles and move you toward a life that dismantles the power these things have had over you.
Yeah. So beautiful wild woman. First of all, I want to know how you came up with that name. And second of all, tell us about it. Tell us about what it is and what it stands for.
Yes. Beautiful wild woman. And so many of these things are very trendy that I speak to. And I just want to acknowledge that because I see it, I know it, and it's part of the thing. It was Lionsgate, and I was in Costa Rica.
Okay.
Lionsgate is August 8th for anyone who doesn't know. It's like the infinity signs, 8, 8.
Got
And I
it.
was born in 88, so it's like extra special. I was also supposed to be born on 8/8/88, but
Wow.
I know, but I was born on 8/11/88. So dating myself a little bit here, but um, so it was a special day, and I was doing a ecstatic dance cacao ceremony type of Lionsgate event with some colleagues in this very beautiful property. Kiva, I believe, is the name of it. And I was at the pool and I was journaling, just reflecting on like what I was bringing into my new year of life. So I was journaling by the pool, and I was setting intentions and like beautiful. And I was like, I am beautiful, wild, I am wild, woman, I am woman. And it just became this little mantra that just, again, I get these downloads, and I was like, beautiful, wild woman. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew to make an Instagram.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is something coming through, and it's going to be powerful and it's going to be beautiful. I had no idea really what it meant. And then fast forward a year later, I recognized it was actually every stage of my journey through my transformation of, as you know, I
Yeah.
was a hairdresser, so cosmetology, 18 years. So that's the beauty aspect and learning what that means on a holistic level. Then there's the wild aspect. I went and lived in a commune. I lived off the earth. I started getting in touch with my indigenous roots. And I also learned a lot about natural medicine and natural healing and getting in touch with the energetics of life.
Yeah.
And then woman, I got my bachelor's in fem studies, and I agree with many things, and I have my own thoughts about other things. But in the last 5 years specifically, I've really deepened my relationship to the feminine. And that has become like a cornerstone of what I do now. And according to an astrologer I have, she's amazing, Carol Ferris. I highly recommend her. She's an elder, and she's like who all the masters go to. She's like top.
Wow.
She's amazing. But she gave me wisdom 3 years ago that was like, you have experienced a woundedness that happened from a young age of your safe space being broken. And this is the cornerstone of the work that you will do for the entirety of your life. And for some of the readers, it might be a little hard, trigger warning, sexual harassment or molestation, but I was told that I was molested by the time I was 2 years old.
Wow.
And there was things that happened until I was 8 years old, and it continued, and it wasn't addressed. And even when I spoke to it, it wasn't taken seriously. So that actually the wounded feminine became the cornerstone of what beautiful wild woman is. So I work with the wounded feminine and transform them into the empowered, embodied, divine feminine, because ultimately I want to help restore the spiritual balance between the masculine and the feminine. And I think if we're going to look at the toxic masculine, which is the wounded masculine, if you ask me, we need to look at what contains and holds the space for that, which is the wounded feminine. And we could even say toxic feminine, and that's where I'll upset some feminists here. But that can be another conversation we can have. And I think it's great to take accountability for our side of the deal. And so if we can, who can hold the toxic masculine and wounded masculine, but the wounded
Right.
toxic feminine? So my idea is to help take accountability and help the feminine become that empowered, most authentic, true, express self.
That's pretty amazing. So If you could teach one thing to everybody listening, if they could take away just one thing out of this talk that we've had, what would that be?
The one thing, bringing curiosity to your experiences and your feelings. Some of us shame and guilt and damn ourselves for the experiences and feelings that we're having. And you actually can't heal in that space of being like, oh, why am I like this?
Right.
What is really helpful is bringing curiosity, loving, open, non judgment to whatever you're experiencing, moving it through the body. So if it's anger, getting a pool noodle, hitting your bed and just expressing the anger. I did this with a client of mine last night, a different client. And after she moved some of this energy, what came through was the real deep reason of where that anger
Right.
came from, which was sadness about the relationship with her mom. And so trusting that these emotions are energy in motion, and we can welcome them, give them a seat at the table and say, hey, what do you need? A pool noodle? You need to cry?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, I'm here with you. I love you. And I'm just going to be with you in this space and not judge anything about it.
Right.
And that is self-love.
So outside of coaching and therapy, what is one thing that people can do to, peel the onion and get really down into their emotions, maybe, help them take a step back and recognize and how they're feeling and let those emotions out?
Yeah, I think a sweet exercise is the 4-4-6-2 breath. And I say, put a hand over your heart, hand over your belly. The top hand is loving nurturance. The bottom hand is loving safety. And breathing in through the nose for 4 counts, holding at the top for 4 counts, breathing out through the mouth for 6, holding at the bottom. And what that does is it calms down the nervous system. And I would just bring back that curiosity to the experiences that you're having, because I think having that curiosity, it leaks into all of the relationships that we have. And when we get to feel that loving non judgment for ourselves, we can start to begin to open up and share that with the loved ones we have and let them know what's going on for us, and bringing that loving, curious non judgment to them as well. And being like, hey, I'm experiencing some of this. I'm not really sure what's going on, but I'm moving through it. And I just wanted to let you know this is what's supportive. And it all stems from the curious, loving non judgment.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, you talked about a lot of your influences, podcasts, reading, networking, talking to people, reading books. I think is so amazing. Like to be able to capture somebody's life experience in a book, and to the knowledge that can be attained from that. And that's one thing that I'm working on myself, is reading as much as I can. I'm trying to finish a book a week. Um, what is one book that had a big impact on your life, and one book that you think everybody should read?
Mm. Big impact on my life. Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah.
And he has another one. I have so many books, but Mastery of Love, that was an interesting one as well. They both just get to the core of our truth from Toltec wisdom, which is a little bit more indigenous.
Yeah.
And I think it makes things so simple and straightforward that it's easily applicable. And it helped me move out of some of that judgment. Like, always do your best.
Yeah.
It's really, and take nothing personal.
Right.
And so these simple principles where it's like, oh, if you just apply that to so many things, it takes away the responsibility and the weight of them. And then Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. That one is just wonderful for anyone who's progressed a little bit into their spiritual journey and wants to see the applicable fictional story that's based on probably real principles of what this actually looks like in practice. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it.
Great. That's fantastic. And, I really thank you for your time, and your story is so fascinating, and all the things that you're working on. Very impressive. And, just like you, I want to be able to help other people and improve their lives. And, I think that if we all come together, we can all live a better life. I'm going to leave you with one last question. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
Yes, Instagram. That's my favorite place. Get to know me. You'll see my reels. I'll tell you exactly what I think. You'll see my cats. So if you like cats, you're in for a treat. And that is Tifanie Mayberry, Tifaniemaybberry. One F, no Y, I-E, like the month and the fruit, Mayberry. So that's probably the best way. Currently, I only have a wait list for one-on-one coaching. I am doing a course on conscious breakups in probably February. So we'll see
That's
what works on the timeline.
that sounds like another great topic for another show.
It does. Bring
Thank
me
you so
back.
much for your time. Yeah, I had so much fun doing this, and there's so much enlightenment from this last 30 minutes of talking to you, and I really appreciate your time. I had a lot of fun, and let's keep things going.
Thank you. I'm receiving that and just feeling so much gratitude for you and so excited for your journey as well. So thank you very much. I appreciate you and me.
Likewise, thank you so much.